it's Miss Sote. So since we focused on factoring for most of class today, I really wanted to make sure we understood factoring because I feel like it's a lot more complicated. But we also mentioned up here that you could solve a quadratic by using the quadratic formula. So we are going to do that example today. We're going to talk about how to solve an equation using the quadratic formula. It's basically just plugging in values into an equation, so it's definitely a lot less steps than factoring, which is why I didn't want to focus on it as much in class. So here we've got this equation, and if you notice right from the start, we have decimals, which if you recall how we factored this example and the example you worked on with your team, using decimals would get really confusing. So whenever you see decimals or whenever you see numbers that you're not super familiar with, I recommend just immediately using the quadratic formula because that's going to be your best bet and it's going to work every single time. So because of that, we're going to work on this using the quadratic formula. And as we wrote early in our notes, here's our quadratic formula again. It's x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So I just copied that equation from earlier in our notes. That's our quadratic formula. And what it's doing is it's finding the x value when y is 0. So it's finding our zeros, which we talked about in our pictures earlier in our notes. Our zeros are our x-intercepts. So that's what this is trying to find. So all I'm going to do is, if you look, this equation is written very similarly to the equation we wrote at the beginning of our notes on Monday, where we had an a, we had a b, and we had a c. And those a, b, and c values are exactly what pop up in our quadratic formula. So our first step is to just figure out, okay, what is a in this equation, what is b, and what is c? So a in this equation is 2.5 because our a value is always what is ever in front of our x squared. Our b value is whatever is in front of the x, so our b is 2. And then our c value is always whatever is just all alone. It doesn't have any x attached to it, so our c is 9.3. And now all we're going to do is substitute these values into our equation. So we're going to have x equals negative b. Our b is 2, plus or minus the square root of b squared. So again, we've got b is 2, and we want to square it. And then minus 4 times a. Our a is 2.5. Times c. Our c is 9.3. Cool. I'm just going to extend my square root a little so it covers everything. And then this whole thing is all over 2 times our a, which is 2.5. Oops. There we go. And so from here, it's just a simple matter of simplifying this. So all we got to do is we have x equals, I'm going to leave this alone for right now, negative 2 plus or minus. Let's focus on what's under the square root right now. 2 squared is 2 times 2, so 2 squared is 4. And then we want to subtract 4 times 2.5 times 9.3. And I just quickly plugged that into Google, and it told me the answer is 93. So we're going to have 4 minus 93, and then 2 times 2.5 is 5. I'm going to shorten my square root a little bit, just so it's not so intense. So now we've got this, and again, let's simplify a little more. Let's work with our square root a little bit more. So we have negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 4 minus 93. That's negative 89 all over 5. If you're like, Miss Sote, why did you just skip over the fact that we have a negative in our square root? Well, I'm going to hit that right now. So this negative 89, we can't have a negative under our square root. That doesn't work. We can't have a negative under a square root symbol. So this should immediately cause you concern. And since we can't have a negative under our square root, we're actually done because our final answer is going to be no solution. And let's talk about what that means. So we get no solution, which means that there are no x-intercepts in this graph, which is honestly fine. Let's graph this real quickly. So I wrote my equation out here, and we've got our graph. And if you notice, the x-axis is not touched. Our graph is way above the x-axis, so we don't have any x-intercepts, which is totally fine. There are a lot of situations where quadratic graphs goes way above the x-axis, and so in this case, our answer is just no solution. You'll have a few more problems like this to practice on the homework, so you can refer to this video if you need some extra help. Other than that, have an amazing day.